Hi everyone, Nicole here from Cornell Cooperative Extension of Nassau County. Thank you to the West Prairie Senior Center for joining us today and hosting this workshop. We are going to be recording the workshop that we're going to be able to share on our website. So I put that in the chat box. It's ccenassau.org. We're also going to share it with the Office for the Aging, so perhaps they can share it to their Facebook later today or tomorrow. So the topic for today is diabetes and our food choices. If you have questions throughout, I will pause in between the different slides. So if you have a question, you can raise it then, or you can use the chat function and my colleague Andrea will ask them as we go. All right, so let's get started. So just as a quick snapshot, diabetes is increasing at an alarming rate in the United States, which I'm sure a lot of us know. And according to the CDC, we're seeing that the statistics report from 2020 is showing that the cases of diabetes has raised to approximately 34.2 million people. I don't know if that sounds like a big number to you, but that's over 10% of our population. And out of that 34 million, over 7 million are not yet diagnosed. So these are people that are living with diabetes that don't even realize that they have it. And so as a reminder, diabetes is caused by the body's inability to either create or effectively use its own insulin, which is produced in the pancreas. And insulin helps to regulate our blood sugar or our glucose levels. And it is crucial in order to provide energy to our cells and our tissues. And without insulin, our body would be starved. It would cause dehydration, mass destruction within the body tissues. And the main types, of course, that we know of are type 1, type 2, and gestational. Those with type 1 must have insulin delivered externally, so either through an injection or a pump to survive. But people with type 2 may be able to control it with healthy eating, regular physical activity, possibly weight loss, and also medication. So there's that medication component. And eventually it is possible that somebody with type 2 may also need external insulin. So medications will sort of change usually throughout the course of the disease. And again, insulin is also used to accommodate that, that need. So as far as pre-diabetes, approximately 84 million of adults, or almost 34% have pre-diabetes. And if you're not familiar with that, it's the condition in which the hemoglobin A1C, which we'll talk about in a second, and our blood glucose levels reflect an average blood glucose higher than normal, but not necessarily high enough to have that diagnosis of diabetes yet. But over a third of people with prediabetes, if left unattended to, will move on to develop type 2 diabetes within 4 years. So if we're looking more specifically at adults 65 and older, we see 1 out of 4 of those older adults that have diabetes, and 1/2 have prediabetes. I know my mom is in that prediabetes category. And so you'll see at the chart on the left how we use the hemoglobin A1C level to diagnose diabetes. So that A1C, it gives us a snapshot of about 3 months what our average blood glucose has been, and that each of these numbers correlates to, say, an average blood glucose. Say you have an average of 150, 170, whatever it may be, over that 3-month period. So this provides us a lot of information, and we can also monitor over time. So you'll see that considered normal is going to be below 5.7, so this non-diabetes green area. Pre-diabetes is going to be in that 5.7 to 6.4. And then above 6.4 is going to be in the diabetes diagnosis category. Any questions? This may just be review for people, but it's just a nice reminder just to get an idea of what we're looking at. So as far as risk factors and consequences, so there are definitely certain risk factors that we have absolutely no control over, right? I cannot control how old I am, can't control my genetics, my family history, but there are some things such as our diet, our weight to a certain extent, and our physical activity levels that we do have some sort of control over. And when it comes to consequences, diabetes can affect many different parts of the bodies, and it's associated with very serious complications: heart disease, stroke, blindness, kidney failure, limb amputation, among other things. So it's definitely important to make sure that you're checking with your doctor regularly to screen for diabetes and prediabetes. And if you do have diabetes, to make sure that you're controlling it the best that you can. So as far as prevention, or at least the reduction in the rate of the development of those chronic complications that we mentioned, we want to look at modifying our overall lifestyle, and also, potentially our nutrient intake, so our diet. So we want to make sure that our blood glucose and our A1C are as close to normal as safely possible. Same thing with our blood pressure, managing our cholesterol, weight loss if appropriate, and also weight management, and the adoption of a healthful eating pattern or overall improvement in diet. So as far as weight, maintaining a healthy weight or weight loss, if you do need to lose weight, your pancreas is better able to keep up with your body's demand for insulin. This is, as far as type 2 diabetes. And it may make it possible for people with diabetes to take less medication. So that weight loss or weight management may also help to prevent or at least reduce the severity of some of those complications we talked about as well. So heart problems, nerve damage, kidney disease. All right, so that was just a brief introduction, a little history of the disease itself. But before we get into a specific, dietary recommendation, it's important to understand the role of carbohydrates in our diet. I definitely think there is some degree of carb phobia in our society, particularly with those who are either trying to lose weight or manage something like diabetes. So along with proteins and fats, we know that carbs are one of those three main nutrients found in our foods and drinks. So one of those macronutrients that we need, in a larger amount. And the carbs that we eat have that direct effect on our blood glucose, unlike protein and fat. Although we do want to remember that many foods are a combination of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Carbohydrates come from plants, and it's important to understand that many of these plant foods are incredibly rich in things like vitamins, minerals, phytochemicals, fiber, things that you hear me talk about all the time that are incredibly important and vital to our overall health. So when you cut out a food group or strictly limit something, you may be at risk for developing either another deficiency or overall deficits in your diet. So you can see here the list of foods that contain carbohydrates. Many, shouldn't surprise you. A lot of people sort of think of like sweets and breads and things like that. But we also want to remember things like fruit, dairy products. Dairy products have something called lactose. So that's a natural sugar found in milk. Legumes like beans and lentils, starchy veggies, so potatoes, corn, and peas. Sometimes people just think that corn on their plate is considered a vegetable, but it's a starchy vegetable. So we want to think about that. Snack food, so again, those cookies, chips, candy, and sweetened beverages and juice. So sometimes people forget about what's in their drink. There's also a difference between a whole grain and a refined grain, especially when it comes to its effect on your blood sugar. We do see studies that suggest whole grains, not necessarily refined, right? We're talking about whole grain bread, things like rice and quinoa and barley can be protective against type 2 diabetes. So there's that intact fiber and intact nutrients that we see in our whole grains that can help to improve things like insulin sensitivity and glucose metabolism. Meanwhile, those refined grains, those white breads, those sweet, processed sweets are incredibly low in fiber and nutrients overall, and have that higher glycemic index or glycemic load. So the effect that it's going to have on your blood sugar. So foods that have few or no carbs are going to be things like meat, fish, poultry, certain types of cheeses. You want to check the food label. Nuts, although there is a little bit of carbohydrate in there, oils and other fats. So we know that when it comes to glucose control or managing your blood sugar, it's about the quality and also the quantity of the carbohydrate. So I'll give you a big example that I used to hear all the time when I worked in a hospital. Patients avoid carrots because they're high in sugar. I'm gonna put that in quotation marks. So compared to another non-starchy vegetable, maybe carrots have more carbs per serving, so 5 to 6 grams, but that by no means is it a high sugar or high carb food that should be avoided. I think we can all agree that we know that carrots have a ton of beneficial nutrients in there that we want to include in our diets. We also shouldn't be avoiding fruits either. So some people have been told by their doctor that they have to limit fruit or maybe a certain fruit, or they can never have bananas again. But we, again, get a ton of beneficial nutrients. So if you're looking to cut something out, focus on those processed foods with added sugars. And we'll also see that when we do consume fruits or other carbohydrates, there's definitely a better way to do it when it comes to glucose management. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Any questions so far? And let me know if I'm going too fast also. This is a huge topic. I'm sure, we could spend probably an hour on almost any one of these slides. So I'm just trying to make sure I hit everything. But if you have specific questions, please don't hesitate to ask or include it in the chat box. So I'm going to touch really quickly on carb counting, because I think this is something that a lot of people with either diabetes, pre-diabetes, newly diagnosed diabetes may discuss with their doctor. So carb counting can help to keep your blood sugar levels in check, close to that target range. And it may be helpful to count carbs that you eat most often to help you understand how it works. So in the beginning especially, it's really a matter of getting the hang of what an appropriate portion of a certain food is. It doesn't mean that you're going to have to be, carb counting for the rest of your life, diligently writing every little thing that you eat all the time. But once you have an idea of what a carb serving looks like, you'll be able to sort of, look at your plate no problem and see if you're on the right track. There's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach, but on average, somebody with diabetes should get about 45% of their overall, daily calories from carbohydrates. And you can see here that a carb serving is measured at 15 grams per serving. So that, if we translate that into per meal, that means most women should aim for about 3 to 4 carb servings, or 45 to 60 grams per meal. And most men can, manage with 4 to 5 carb servings, or 60 to 75 grams of carbs per meal. A snack might be 1 to 2 carb servings, and these numbers can be completely different depending on your size, your activity level, your weight, your medications, all, so many different factors. So again, this is just an example. So if you want to get the hang of what a carb serving looks like, this, you could use this short list on the left, and you can also look at the nutrition facts label to get more information. So a small piece of fruit, a slice of bread, a half a cup of cooked oatmeal, a third a cup of cooked pasta or rice. So some people look at this and they're like, a third a cup of cooked pasta. I don't know about you, I'm Italian. I grew up, having a gigantic plate of pasta. But if you really think about what, an appropriate meal might look like, so my fist might be about a cup. So if a third of a cup of cooked pasta is 1 serving, my fist, which is a cup, would be 3. So perhaps maybe you stick with about that cup of pasta, which sounds maybe a little sad to Italians out there, but you bulk it up with beans or veggies or, meatballs or whatever it is that you're having with your pasta. So looking at the food label on the right, if this was a bag of chips, for example, and we look at the total carbs that I have here circled, 46 grams of carbs, you also have to look at the number of servings per container and the serving size, right? So if this was a bag of chips and I ate the whole bag of chips, I have to multiply everything by 2. So that means I multiply the total carbohydrates, which is 46, by 2. So really this bag of chips that I just ate gave me 92 grams of carbohydrates, right? And so if you divide that by 15, we're looking at about 6 carb servings, right? And for a bag of chips, not necessarily ideal, right? So you do want to keep that in mind. And also remember to count carbohydrates that are in beverages. So fruit juices, alcoholic beverages, especially like sweet mixed drinks and beer. So they can add a lot of carbohydrates as well. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, we could talk for an hour just on carbohydrate counting. And this isn't something that you necessarily have to include, but it also helps you to get an idea of, certain serving sizes. So that's why I found it helpful. I just wanted to touch on that real quick. All right. So more label reading, more fun stuff, right? When it comes to carbohydrates, it's no surprise that we do want to focus on things like vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, dairy products, and emphasize those foods that are higher in fiber and lower in added sugars. We could do an entire class on added sugars and sweeteners and things like that, but I will try to summarize briefly. So added sugars, if you're not familiar, those are those sugars and syrups that are either added to foods or beverages when they're processed or prepared. So this doesn't include natural sugars that are found in milk and fruit. And most of us do get too many added sugars, especially from beverages like sodas or fruit drinks, sweetened coffees and teas, pastries, ice creams, things like that. And we do see that excessive consumption of these added sugars can lead to health problems such as weight gain, and obesity, type 2 diabetes, which is up there, and heart disease. And we're seeing that many Americans consume about 14% of their daily calories from added sugars. These numbers were from 2003 to 2010. It may have increased since then, but the recommendation is to keep it below 10%. So somebody that has a 2,000 calorie diet, you want to no more than 200 calories from added sugars, ideally less than that, right? When it comes to something that says no sugar added, right, it can be a little tricky. So when you see no sugar added, that means that that food doesn't contain high sugar ingredients and there isn't sugar added during processing or packaging. It still may be high in carbohydrates. No sugar added doesn't mean no sugar, period. So keep that in mind. As far as non-nutritive and nutritive sweeteners, so non-nutritive sweeteners, things like sugar, they also call them sugar substitutes or artificial sweeteners a lot of the time, but they contain few or no calories or nutrients. So saccharin, aspartame, neotame, sucralose, stevia, and monk fruit, even though stevia and monk fruit will add a little bit of calories in there. But there are a few concerns about these. So people that use artificial sweeteners, they may replace those calories somewhere else. So I'm having a diet soda, so I can have this piece of cake or something like that. So that can sort of cancel out those benefits that you were looking for by choosing the diet drink. They can also change the way that we taste food. So people who routinely use artificial sweeteners may start to find less intensely sweet foods like fruit, which is, objectively a sweet food, less appealing. So you want to consider that as well. You sort of get used to that increased, sweetness. May also prevent us from associating sweetness with calorie intake. So historically, ever since caveman times, when you eat something, especially something sweet, you know that you're going to get energy from it. You are expecting that sort of jolt. And when you consume something sweet that doesn't have calories, you sort of, mess up your body's recognition of that food. And you may actually crave sweets more. We also are starting to see that they may have these artificial sweeteners and non-nutritive sweeteners may have, effects on our gut microbiome. We don't quite understand all of that yet, but keep that in mind as well, especially since we're understanding how crucial our gut health is to overall health. As far as nutritive sweeteners, that's something that it will provide, calories. So honey, maple syrup, agave, corn syrup. Sugar alcohols are also in this category. They do contain carbohydrates and calories. And so things like sorbitol, xylitol, those OLs that you'll see are those sugar alcohols. So they're not necessarily low in calories or carbohydrates. So keep that in mind. Sugar alcohols may also cause GI upset. So if you've ever had sort of one of those, it may have no sugar added, but that's because they added, sugar alcohol. So they sort of get around it and you notice some sort of GI upset, that may be the culprit. We also don't have a ton of human studies on, effects, especially long-term effects of use of these different alternative sweeteners. So like anything, consider moderation, right? And just be mindful when you can be. Any questions? Okay. So if you think about the way that we digest foods, we generally digest carbohydrates first, followed by protein and fat. So when you have a carb-heavy meal or a meal that's consisting of only carbohydrates, we're more likely to see that blood sugar spike and potentially stay elevated. When you include protein and or fat, you create a balanced plate, right? And you see a more gradual increase in blood glucose, and you may see a more sort of gentle decrease throughout the day. We're generally more satisfied when we have a balanced meal. In addition to keeping us fuller, feeling fuller longer, fat just tastes good, right? Things, butter tastes good, avocados taste good. We sort of get that satisfaction from there as well. And including healthy fats in our meals and snacks is a win-win all around. So we're also seeing with fat that it's a quality over a quantity that we want to focus on. And we see that research is showing that when we replace a saturated fat, so say a butter, with an unsaturated fat like an olive oil or avocado or something like that, we can help to reduce our total and LDL cholesterol, which reduces our cardiovascular disease risk. As far as protein, it's definitely a nutrient of concern as we get older in order to maintain our muscle mass, in addition to its effect on our overall diet quality. And we see that there was a study that shows those who ate a 500-calorie breakfast with at least 35% protein had lower post-meal blood sugar throughout the day than those who ate a breakfast that was lower in protein and higher in carbohydrates. When it comes to fiber, dietary fiber, especially the more soluble types, reduce the amount of that glucose that's absorbed from the digestive tract. So good sources of fiber, in particular dietary soluble fiber, will be oats, beans, apples, citrus fruits, nuts. And for most of us, we could always use a little bit more fiber. We want to aim for at least about 25 grams of fiber, and the average American only gets about 17 grams. So again, that number might look different to you if you have a certain health condition, but when you can, I would say to include more fiber and be sure you're also increasing your hydration, because if you increase your fiber without increasing that water hydration, you may get some constipating side effects. So I just picked out some really nice pictures. These aren't, meals that I made, but I wanted to pick out some balanced options we might want to look at that were pretty to look at. So we have, in the top left, you have some avocado toast. So that looks like some whole grain bread, right? That you're getting some of that fiber. We have avocados and maybe what looks like pinole nuts. So those healthy fats, a little bit of plant-based protein from that nut. And we have some eggs, hard-boiled eggs, or soft boiled maybe. Bottom left, we have what looks like a really nice oatmeal, I'm gonna say. Maybe some oatmeal. It looks like there might be some sort of nut butter in there, definitely some nuts and seeds, fruit, right? So packed with fiber and all kinds of good stuff. Then in the middle, we have a sandwich. I couldn't tell you exactly. Maybe that's like an egg or a chicken salad with some veggies on there and some whole grain bread. Pasta. So pasta is not something you have to completely eliminate, but if you'll notice, it's not an entire bowl of pasta. There's a good source of maybe that looks like either chicken or something like that. So a lean source of protein. It also maybe looks like a pesto. So you're getting antioxidants from that basil, maybe some sort of nut. So again, healthy fats, maybe throw some olive oil on there. Top right, it looks like we have a piece of fish with maybe a sweet potato puree and some veggies. Again, you want a colorful plate so you know that you're getting all those antioxidants, all those different vitamins and minerals. And then a smoothie on the bottom. So we've talked about smoothies before, how it's important to include a source of protein and a source of fat. So a smoothie can be a balanced meal or snack as well. Any questions so far? Just gonna put the chat back up so I can see. Okay. So as far as timing of meals, research does suggest that eating consistently throughout the day can help to maintain our glycemic control. So that doesn't mean that every person is the same or that you need to have a strict, rigid daily schedule, but there are some general good practices, that's what I'm trying to say, for meal and snack timing when you have diabetes in particular. So breakfast, as its name suggests, is us breaking our overnight fast. So it's important to give our body and our brain that fuel to start the day. So if you don't get that fuel, our body needs to create its own fuel. So you might be releasing blood sugar into the bloodstream and cause your blood sugar to increase even without having anything to eat. Skipping breakfast has been shown to cause blood sugar spikes throughout the day. And when you skip breakfast, there's also a greater chance that you'll grab something that's maybe less healthy later on in the day or overeat even. And what we're seeing is the best practice is to eat within about an hour and a half of waking and have a breakfast that combines at least 2 of those food groups. So again, carbohydrates and protein, maybe have a, carbohydrate and fat, something like that. And we do see that eating breakfast can also help you to maintain or lose weight. We see that the most successful people that lose weight and keep it off are breakfast eaters. We also don't want to go longer than 5 hours between meals. Ideally, it'll look less than that. Of course, it happens. We also want to consider flipping the typical American diet and eat more at breakfast and lunch and maybe less at dinner. So by doing this, we tend to not feel as hungry late in the evening, and it can help to prevent overeating at night. When it comes to snacks, so snacks are often thought of as sort of that high fat, high sugar, high salt food, but that doesn't have to be the case. Smart snacks, when their appropriate portion size and the appropriate content, can be incredibly beneficial for curbing our hunger, preventing overeating at the next meal, and also help with that blood sugar management. So for many of us, 100 to 150 calories and maybe 15 to 30 grams of carbs is ideal for a snack. But that could vary, again, based on medication, your lifestyle, activity level, all those things. Make sure that you're also not snacking just because you're stressed or bored. We've talked a little bit about mindful eating before, so keep that in mind, that a snack should help you, get through the day as far as your hunger level. And so think about it next time you're reaching for something, and it's out of stress or something like that. Snacking before bedtime. So it's okay to have a small snack before bedtime, especially if you tend to wake up with high blood sugar levels, or if you have a medication that you need to take with food. A small nutrient-dense snack before bed is not the problem, right? It can be a problem if you're mindlessly eating before bed or going overboard, on a certain type or amount of food. You don't necessarily want to hit your body with a huge, 5 scoop sundae at 11 p.m. Because extra calories and carbohydrates at night can affect your blood sugar, of course, and make it harder to sleep. Our bodies are also more insulin resistant in the evening, which is sort of another reason to keep those like nighttime snacking habits on the healthier or lighter side. So if you do choose a snack not long before bed, think about that 15 grams of carbs and include a low-fat protein or a healthy fat in there too. And again, just touching on sleep a little bit. So again, if you're eating a lot at night, it may affect your sleep. And if you're having trouble sleeping, you may be hungrier throughout the day. So your body's sort of constantly searching for fuel. So adequate sleep is incredibly important as far as how it affects your mental health and your physical health as well. So make sure that you are trying to get sleep if you can, right? I know we can't always with stress or something like that, but that's important. Any questions? So again, small changes, big results. You don't have to completely, cut foods out or become a vegetarian or something like that. I will share with you that you also can't tell what, how healthy your person is or how, they're maintaining their blood sugar based on what they look like. When I was in college, this is before I was a dietitian, of course, I became a vegetarian and I was about the weight I am now. And within, I want to say 6 months to a year becoming a vegetarian, my spiked up and my A1C was 5.9. So that put me in the pre-diabetes category. So I was a vegetarian. I was, a 20-year-old. I looked the way I do now, generally, a normal weight, and I technically had pre-diabetes. So just because you have a certain eating style or you look a certain way or you're a certain age does not mean that you are healthy. I'll put that in quotes, right? So keep that in mind. And there are certain things that you can do that will impact in big ways. So filling half your plate with non-starchy veggies. You don't have to be counting. You don't have to be measuring things out if you use the plate method. So if you look at the plate here, put, a ton of salad or, if you have made some roasted Brussels sprouts and broccoli, whatever it is. So you already know you're on the right track when you have half that plate filled with your non-starchy veggies. And then you split the remaining half with a lean protein and that starchy veg, like a potato or, rice or quinoa or something like that. So again, you didn't have to do any measurement. I could tell you right now that my fist, it would probably fit on about a quarter of a plate. So you're in the ballpark. Make sure you have a healthy fat and or protein at each meal and snack. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me say that. Do not skip meals. That's not good either. You know, just trying to reduce your overall calorie intake throughout the day or carbohydrate intake throughout the day is not the answer. We want consistent intake, and that can help to maintain that sort of gradual increase, you know, of your blood sugar throughout the day without crazy spikes and lows. You absolutely, you know, you were trying to avoid lows as well. Be mindful of portion sizes, be mindful of beverages. So all of these things, there's no strict, you know, there's no strict rule, do and don't. Maybe try, you know, little things here and there and see how it affects your life, how it affects your eating, and if it's manageable. Because the last thing you want to do is completely revamp your diet and have something that's not sustainable for you. Any questions before we move on to the recipe? Okay, so I'll talk about the recipe a little bit and then I'll stop sharing so you can see what I'm doing. So I've talked about overnight oats. I believe we've done a post or two about it. And I wanted to make a granola that I love, but I didn't want to put my oven on. I don't know about any of you, especially with this heat the past few weeks. So something like overnight oats is an all year round, super easy, healthy, great option for breakfast, even dessert, snack. So you'll see here that I'm combining some old-fashioned oats. So those are, we don't want instant because they might sort of just completely disintegrate. And steel cut don't quite, you know, soften up. So they might be a little too hard. So these are old-fashioned, and then some sort of liquid. So I'm using regular milk because I do want that. I'm using low fat, but cow's milk, because I do want that protein in here. You're also going to get that calcium. You can use something like an oat milk, an almond milk, something that's fortified with that calcium that we're looking for. If you're looking for a non-dairy alternative that's still going to give that protein boost, you can use soy milk. Also today I'm adding hemp seeds, but you can do chia seeds, hemp seeds, ground flax seeds, some, you know, combination of them. Some diced peaches. So peaches are in season and I got peaches from my CSA, but if this was the fall, you could use apples, you could use frozen berries, you could use bananas, you can use, you know, any fruit that you're interested in. A little bit of cinnamon. I am out of nutmeg, so I'm going to add a little bit more cinnamon today, and a splash of vanilla. So you'll notice here that I don't have any added sugars. So if we're looking at the nutrition facts label, it's about 200 calories, 31 grams of carbs. So that's going to be 2 carb servings or choices if you are counting. We do have 4 grams of fiber, 10 grams of protein. So again, that's the milk that's giving us protein. The seeds are giving us a little bit of protein. If you wanted to increase the protein even more or add some probiotics, you could add some yogurt. You may need a little bit more liquid. And again, that liquid ratio is a total preference. If you've never made overnight oats, what you'll notice in the morning, right, if you put it in your fridge 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, or overnight, the oats will absorb a lot of the liquid. So you may need to add a little bit more if you like it looser. You can also add nuts. I would suggest adding the nuts when you're about to eat it, because otherwise they just sort of lose that texture you like. So adding, you know, nuts in the morning when you're ready to have it, you'll get a little bit more protein, fiber, those healthy fats. I also do like mine warmed up, so I'll put it in the microwave for a few seconds, but it's super convenient to have this in your fridge ready to go. And again, you want it in the fridge for, say, 6 to 8 hours. So either making it in the morning for dessert later on, making it at night for your breakfast the next day. So I'm going to stop sharing just so you can see what I have. And again, any questions, just please use the chat. So I already have my 1/3 cup of old-fashioned oats. I have 1/2 cup of milk. And again, you can use more or less depending on your preference. Use 2 teaspoons of my hemp seeds. So I talk about hemp seeds a lot. If you've never had them, they sort of look like uncooked quinoa. They have a nutty smell. They're soft. They're not like chia where they're sort of crunchy. They have like a nuttier texture. So they're nice in smoothies. They're nice in overnight oats. They're nice in, you know, yogurt parfaits. And again, you're going to get some of those plant-based proteins. You're going to get those omega-3s that we're looking for, and a ton of different minerals. So if you look on the nutrition facts label here, again, these are from Trader Joe's, but you can really find them anywhere. We're getting magnesium, manganese, phosphorus, thiamine, riboflavin, iron, all this good stuff. And granted, that would be 3 tablespoons, but we're only using 2 teaspoons today. So again, if you had 3 tablespoons, you'd be getting 110% of your manganese. We probably don't even think about manganese. All right, so I'm gonna add my peaches. So I have my diced peaches. I left the skin on just because I do want that, extra fiber. All right, I'm gonna do a little bit, I said a little bit more cinnamon just because I don't have nutmeg. And a splash of vanilla. So a little bit goes a long way with the extracts. So just a tiny bit. And again, this will sort of, adding things like cinnamon and vanilla and the peaches will sort of, they'll give me all that sweetness I'm looking for without needing to add sugar, honey, brown sugar, maple syrup, all that. So you'll see here that everything is sort of mixed nicely together. I could probably add a little bit more liquid just because I know for my taste, I like it a little bit on the looser side, but this may be perfect for you. And in the morning or later on today, you'll see that everything sort of absorbs and will become more cohesive. You won't get all that liquid in there. But again, I like to keep them in my fridge just for a quick treat, and I keep them in mason jars. If you are going to warm them up, please remove the top of your mason jar. Remember not to put metal in your microwave. So I'm going to be excited to have that as a treat for later, but I hope you enjoyed that recipe. Again, people are sometimes scared of the amount of carbohydrates, right? If you go back to the slide, there's 31 grams of carbohydrates. But again, we're getting those carbs from things like the oats and the peaches and a little bit from the seeds. So we're not necessarily getting it from all these refined sources or added sugars. So I'm okay with that. All right. Do we have any questions? I don't know if I went really fast. Like I said, it's a very large topic. I tried to sort of give everybody an overview just so we could touch on a lot of those key points, but if you have a specific question, feel free to ask. We can also give people the opportunity to speak if you'd like.
That was great, Nicole. If anybody wants to speak to Nicole, you can raise your hand. You can click on raise your hand, and I will allow you to talk. Okay, Judy, I am going to allow you to talk, so you might have to unmute yourself. But go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. It was a great presentation.
Thanks, Judy.
As someone who is pre-diabetic, when would be the times I should be checking my blood sugar? If I bought my own little kit, to monitor, my blood sugar level.
That's a good question. So you want to see maybe before and after meals, right? Like how the meal affects you, because we could have the same meal and it might affect our blood sugar differently. So if you wanted to take it before and then also at about an hour after your meal, even 2 hours, just to see what your trend looks like, you can get a better idea of what it maybe looks like throughout the day, maybe right in the morning. If you're just gathering your information at this point, finding out what it is right in the morning, before and after your meals, at night, so you get a trend, right? Just an overall idea of what it is for you, because everybody's gonna be a little different.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else wants to talk? You can click on raise your hand. Okay, somebody asked where I can watch this later. Sorry, Nicole. We will post after the recording is finished. We will post it on our website. Nicole put it up on the top, www.ccenassau.org. We have a virtual learning page that's strictly for recordings, and you'll see a nutrition section. So that should be up, I would say later today, maybe tomorrow morning. I think Judy wants to talk again. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, one more. You've already answered this question, but you know, there's so much information out there about the intermittent fasting. And I follow that to a certain degree because I don't eat breakfast in the morning. You know, and so it gives me like a 16-hour stretch without meals. So are you saying that this is something we definitely should not be following if we're like pre-diabetic?
It's tricky. I mean, it is definitely a popular topic, and there is a lot of research that shows that it can help, especially with weight loss. But once you get into blood sugar management, I would be a little cautious, just because, like I mentioned, your body's going to want to fuel you. So if you're in a fasted state overnight, you wake up, you don't eat, your blood sugars are going to go up one way or another, right? Your either body's going to release the glucose so that it can function, or it's gonna, you're waiting for something to eat to actually do that. So I would definitely suggest talking to your doctor about that, especially if you're sort of tracking what your blood sugar trend is to see how that would affect you. People with diabetes especially, I would say there's caution with intermittent fasting, but I would definitely recommend talking to your doctor about it as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I don't see any more questions.
Okay. We will stop recording, and again, we will hopefully have this up later today or tomorrow morning on our website. I'll also share it with the Office for the Aging, so perhaps they can share it as well.